Hello, welcome back to another episode of John the PM, where we believe that managing projects is not just a job, but a way of life. Today, I just want to very briefly go over the 7 basic quality tools that all project managers should be familiar with. And I can almost guarantee you that just in general, people probably use about 5 out of 7. So, what are the 7? Uh, Cause and effect diagram, control chart, check sheet, histogram, Pareto chart, scatter diagram, and the flow chart. All right, so the first one is the fishbone diagram. Sometimes you may hear it referred to as cause and effect diagram. Other times you may hear it as called Ishikawa. That was really the name of the individual who formulated this process. At the end of the day, what usually happens is that you put your primary problem at the head. Okay, that's where we get the fishbone, just at the head. And that's going to be your primary problem, okay, that you are trying to resolve. And then you may have 4 or 5 categories. One very popular one is the 4 M's, means, methods, people power, used to be manpower, on those areas, and money, on that side. Okay, on those areas. And basically, what you'll do is you have a brainstorming session with your team, and as they come up with items, you put them up under the appropriate category. Does it have to be those? The answer is no. It can be any category that you like, on those pieces. But it's just a way to kind of understand what the relationship is. Now, in conjunction with those relationships, what some teams will also do is an exercise called the 5 whys. In other words, you would ask why 5 times. So before you do this, make sure that you talk to the individual and let them know that you're doing the 5 whys. Otherwise, you'll have an adverse reaction on those areas. But typically, by the time you get to the fourth or fifth why, you've kind of narrowed down to what the root issue is. Second one is second basic tool is going to be the control chart. Basically, what will happen is that you'll have a mean or median, and then you have upper control limits, lower control limits. And essentially, if the data point exceeds either the upper or the lower control limit, then you consider that process to be out of control. One very favorite example that I use is the bus stop. So I'm putting you into play right now. Let's assume that you have a young child, and that child goes to school. So let's assume that she is in the first grade, and the bus is supposed to drop her off at the bus stop at 4 p.m. All things held equal, most people don't get overly concerned if the bus arrives at 3:58 or 3:56, or if the bus arrives at 4:03 or 4:04. So essentially, that from that 3:56 to 4:04, that's your lower control limit, that's your upper control limit. As long as the bus is arriving around that time, normally people are okay. Now, I'm going to change the script a little bit. And let's assume that they drop your first grade child off at the bus stop at 3:30 or 3 o'clock. Now, clearly, that is way that is not good. Okay, you're expecting 4. They drop the child off at 3:30. You're nowhere near in sight. You gotta you have other issues that are going on. In that case, you will, take immediate action. And once you find out once you find out about the discrepancy, let's flip the script a little bit, and let's assume that they drop your child off at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. Again, I would surmise that probably Mama Bear, Papa Bear will come out, and immediate action will be taken. They'll start calling the school district. Hey, where's my child? Where's my child? So those are just examples of when you can be out of control. There's also sometimes we'll call it the rule of 7. In other words, you have 7 data points that are somewhere between the mean and the upper control limit or the lower control limit. So technically, it's in standard, so technically, it's in acceptable limits and things of that nature. However, after 7 times, a new norm has been established. And at that point in time, we consider the process to be out of control. So let's put an example to play. Let's continue to use the bus example. In other words, the child was supposed to be let off at 4 o'clock. And let's assume that for 7 days in a row, the bus drops your child off at 4:05. Okay. It's kind of stretching the boundaries there. Technically it's within control and everything. But honestly, and you and I both know this is what's going to happen is you'll start arriving at the bus stop at what time? Yes, 4:05. Okay, on that side. From a PM's perspective, again, when you hit the rule of seven, 7 data points, then we do consider that out of control, and you need to go on ahead and take corrective action. Another basic quality tool that you can use is a check sheet. Sometimes we'll just simply call these tally sheets. Basically, you have, sometimes they'll arrange them in terms of days and the cause of failure. And whenever the cause of failure occurs, you can put a little checklist on those. The beautiful piece of this diagram, that this data set actually, is that you can put it into an Excel, and from there you can determine your histogram, formulate histogram, or formulate a Pareto chart.
This is just a real quick interruption here. I know that you're enjoying yourself on that fascinating show with the world of managing projects, but just wanted to let you know that we do have books on sale, and this particular one is called The Project Manager's Quick Start Guide. I think it is an outstanding read. Why? Because, well, I wrote it. But on a serious note, it is really meant for those who are brand new in the world of managing projects, or let's say that you're mentoring a young individual, a young go-getter, and they have the very, very first project and you want to set them up for success. This is the book for you. Down in the description notes, you can go ahead and order at your will. Thank you. Have an awesome day.
So that leads us into a histogram. The histogram just allows you to evaluate the shape and essential tendency of your data so that you can assess whether your data following a specific distribution, such as the normal distribution, on those areas. So that's helpful in analytics. My favorite tool, which is a Pareto chart, and keep in mind the Pareto chart is a form of a histogram. But honestly, this is my favorite tool. The reason why is because it helps you to prioritize what is really important and what's not. Sometimes we'll call it the 80-20 rule. In other words, 80% of my problems are caused by 20% of my people. 80% of my revenue is generated by 20% of my customers. And now we know where to focus our energies at, on those pieces. What's interesting about this chart is that you can see, like right here, is basically, if I eliminate this error, then majority of my errors are gone. Now, in full disclosure, there may be a time when you go after the smallest one first. And the reason why is because we'll call those low-hanging fruits. In other words, those are just really simple things that you could do in order to get a win on the leaderboard, in that regard. So there might be a time when you might actually go after the smaller one first. Scatter plot. This is basically using a regression analysis in order to determine your calculations, your variables. A couple of times when you might use this is actually dive tables. It's based on scatter plots, just as a matter of fact. Another favorite one that I usually use as an example is ice cream sales. In other words, you plot out the amount of sales that you have based on the temperature of the day. So, and after a period of time, you can determine how much ice cream you will sell just based on what the temperature was for that day. On those pieces. And yes, I actually did find an ice cream shop. It's up in Detroit, Michigan. And just as a matter of fact, on Livernois Avenue. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was a family owned shop. Really great, salt of the earth people. And believe it or not, they actually had 30 years of data which allow them to stay in business to compete against the likes of Dairy Queens and things of that nature. So that was actually one of the tools that they used. The flow chart, sometimes you might call it a process map. Basically, you map out your activities and understand what the work is and what it's not. You may go into it a little bit further and ask what's value added work versus non value added work. Look at your cycle times and kind of derive some quantitative methodologies from there. But again, it's pretty helpful so that you can identify do loops or work that just simply doesn't need to be done. All right. Just as an add-on here, the cost of quality. There's going to be two forms of cost of quality. One's going to be cost of conformance, and the other one is going to be cost of non-conformance. Cost of conformance is basically your preventive and your appraisal costs. Cost of non-conformance is going to be your internal and your external failure costs. In an ideal world, the cost of conformance should be less than the cost of non-conformance. Another way to look at this is if you did not have time to do it right the first time, when did you think that you would, or why would you think that you had time to do it right the second, third, and fourth time? All right. So those are just basically the seven basic quality tools. And we also talked a little bit about the cost of quality. I guess that was just an add-on, for your pleasure on those pieces. I could go into a lot of more detail in each and every one of them, and I would actually encourage you as project managers to do a little bit more research on them. But you should be familiar with them, and you should also be able to cite when you have actually used it. Of course, from a practical perspective, just food for thought. Most people have used at least 5 out of 7 of these basic quality tools. All right. Well, that concludes another session of John the PM. If you like this session, please hit the like button. And of course, we always encourage you to subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. My staff would greatly appreciate it on those areas. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.